Long before he was president, Theodore Roosevelt was a young assistant secretary of the Navy with a conviction that America's strength and security were bound to the sea. He studied naval power, argued for a modern fleet, and later sent that fleet around the globe as a signal that the United States had arrived on the world stage. This conversation takes up that legacy: sea power, readiness, command, and the responsibilities of American leadership in a changing world. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished speakers to the stage for our panel, Theodore Roosevelt's Impact on U.S. Naval Leadership, moderated by one of our trustees, Beth Myers.
Thank you, everybody, for coming to this beautiful, beautiful building on the first day that it is working as a facility for conversations like this. And thank you again for making the trip up here this morning. I'd like to introduce you to my three panel guests. The first is Admiral Christopher Grady. He served as the 12th Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the nation's second highest ranking military officer. Over a distinguished 40-year Navy career, he commanded at every level and advised senior U.S. leaders on global military operations, strategy, and national security. Welcome. And our next panelist is Admiral Stuart Munsch, a native North Dakotan and retired four-star admiral. That was sure to get an applause. And you didn't get a lot of ocean experience here in North Dakota.
Well, North Dakota is the geographic center of the continent of North America.
Fair enough. So. Okay, you have a retort for that. Thank you. Admiral Munsch most recently commanded U.S. naval forces in Europe and Africa and NATO's Joint Force Command in Naples. Earlier in his career, he commanded the USS Albuquerque, where he and his crew embraced Theodore Roosevelt's man in the arena ethos. And now we've got one of our guests is still in service, Rear Admiral Jonathan Townsend. Thank you for making the trip here. He is the commander of Navy Region Northwest, a New York native, Naval Academy graduate, and career naval aviator. He has held senior operational and installation commands, including at Naval Support Activity South Potomac. His career reflects the Navy's enduring work of readiness, stewardship, and leadership close to home and around the world. I apologize for having to read that, but their careers are so distinguished, I didn't want to make a mistake in any of the details. So we will get right onto it, and I'm going to start with a question that's pretty broad. Theodore Roosevelt famously said, "A good Navy is not a provocation for war. It is the surest guarantee of peace." We just heard from Doris, who told us all about Theodore Roosevelt's many character traits. And when you think about him today, when you think about Roosevelt's impact on the Navy, in a broad sense, what is the single most important part of his legacy that still influences naval leaders today?
Well, for Navy Region Northwest, I'm reminded on a daily basis of something that Theodore Roosevelt, was the founding father of, and that is our modern Navy, our seagoing blue water Navy. And in Bremerton, Washington, where the Navy Region Northwest is sort of headquartered, we're undertaking an incredible investment in shipyard modernization. So we've got the multi-mission dry dock that will be capable of handling not only the newest Ford-class carrier, but any class of ships. And it's just a reminder of the legacy, the transition. Theodore Roosevelt was the founding father of our modern Navy as we know it today, and the global force that it is. And I'm in a seat where we're making transition to looking forward and looking at the future, the next 50 years, and our ability to sustain what he started. So that's what I think about.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to remember about Theodore Roosevelt in the Navy is that he is the father of the modern Navy. And it's a very broad brush of things that he did. I'll just talk about the people issues. So he was the one that introduced promotions based on merit instead of time and grade. And that introduced a competitiveness that really propelled the officer corps forward that still exists today. He was the one who renovated the Naval Academy. He doubled the size of the student body, he changed the curriculum to be practical oriented, and he physically rebuilt the place. And the third thing is about the character. And he knew that a Navy needed a foundational historical person to call upon who provided the character that he wanted in the Navy, and that was John Paul Jones. So he sent an expedition to Paris to find the unmarked grave of John Paul Jones, brought back the remains, had a huge recognition ceremony for that. And to this day, midshipmen memorize many quotes from John Paul Jones. Probably the most famous one is, "I have not yet begun to fight," which is still the battle cry at the Naval Academy and sporting events.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you for hosting us today, and thank all of you for being here. What a momentous occasion! Congratulations on the opening of the library. Quite an accomplishment, and it's an honor for me to be here with you and with my two shipmates here, and with all of you. So thanks for having us. You can run down the list of accomplishments on the part of the president, and it's quite a legacy. You've heard several of them here today and how we think about things. I'll go up one notch even further, and I'll say, and this is a quote, the president always looked for an officer corps that was of push and intelligence. Push was the idea that you had to have a bias for action, that you were aggressive, that you didn't rest on your laurels, that you were hardy, and that you didn't just trust what you see, but you had to go down and touch everything. So this is the push side. I think this reflects his strenuous life mantra. And then the intelligence side, I think absolutely critical. You know, Stuart, you talked about character. I think that fits well with the Navy now, but it's also competence. And when I think about competence, I can see the strains of the president in the way I characterize competence, and that's character, that's three things. You need to have technical competence. You need to have tactical competence, and you need to have leadership competence. They're all very different, but the president would say you need to be all of those. And so push and intelligence, I think is, if you were to talk to a young midshipman now, whether it's at OCS or at NROTC or at the Naval Academy, you could go to them and say, will you live up to TR's legacy and be an officer of push and intelligence? I'm here to tell you that if you get a chance to meet some of these young men and women, the answer is yes.
Thank you, that's great. And you said Theodore Roosevelt was the father of the modern Navy, and he didn't just expand the Navy. He changed it fundamentally, and he therefore changed history and set the stage for America to become a superpower. And I want to drill down a little bit on what you started, all three of you touched on culture. How did he change the culture in the Navy? The idea of constant readiness, as well as the infrastructure of the fleet, and how did those blend together to really transform the modern Navy from 1905 till now?
Yeah, he led a transformation in the building of the Navy, the employment of the Navy, and the maintenance of the Navy. So the building of the Navy was shifting from older ships, and there were still some wooden ships, into steel ships, steam-powered, stockpiling coal around the world, and the like, and bringing in modern naval guns, which was critical at that point. And that dovetails with what I said about the Naval Academy curriculum. And then employing the Navy with the Great White Fleet, going around the world, over a year voyage, sending the signal, America's here.
Will you just explain a little bit to the audience the nature of the Great White Fleet? I think some of us know, but some may not.
Yeah, so these were the new steel ships that he had built for the Navy.
16 of them.
And they sailed around the world, providing a physical presence of United States sovereignty. They were painted white to make them stand out from the normal gray hulls that existed in the world then. And it was a really remarkable example of naval diplomacy around the world.
Yeah, I'll pitch in on that. 16 ships, 14 months, 43,000 miles transited. Painted white because those were the peacetime colors, but the message was very clear. The message was, I think, had several audiences. The first message was maybe the German high seas fleet, but perhaps a rising challenge in Asia, notably the Japanese Imperial Navy. It was internal. He was in the midst of trying to build battleship navy, and he was, you could transfer this to 2026. He wanted battleships. He wanted Congress to pay for it. And so TR, ever a master of the media, sent this fleet around to speak to the nation so that the nation would speak to its members on the Hill. And then the last thing is he knew he was going to learn some lessons on it. And Stuart touched on a couple of them. One was modern ship design. So when it went around the Cape, around South America, they learned that steel ships, as important as they were, had to be built differently to handle in heavy seas. They learned that coaling, which was the method of fueling at the time, led to a great vulnerability, and that was they had to rely on British coal, which then led to the translation of, well, we can't have that, and then we can't offshore that requirement, and that led to the innovation of oil-fired ships.
Interesting.
And it also led to the understanding about logistics and how important logistics were. In this respect, it was living up to one of his mentors, then Captain, soon to be Admiral Mahan, who was the great acolyte of that. We always say tactics are fun, but it's in logistics that the war is won, and the President Roosevelt really espoused that. So I do have more things to say about it later, but we'll let Stuart go.
Yeah, it led to the recognition also that having two coastlines and one navy and having to go all the way around South America was not going to work out real well.
Well, that leads exactly into my next question, and that is talking about the Panama Canal. You really can't talk about TR in the Navy without talking about the Panama Canal. And he saw it not simply as an engineering miracle, but also as a strategic asset that fundamentally changed the way the Navy could protect our nation. And he was one of the early people to recognize that geography could shape the future of a nation. So more than a century later, the Panama Canal has been in the news recently, but how important is the Panama Canal now, and how important has it been to American naval strategy?
Well, I would say it's every bit as critical today as it was when it was conceived, and it came at a great cost. A lot of lives were expended in the construction of the canal, and we in the Navy give a lot of importance to strategic choke points, in areas where where we have to navigate, in those critical locations, and it certainly is one of those. The importance of it today with global shipping, 90% of trade is moving on the seas, and a piece of navigable water to get in between North and South America like that is every bit as important, maybe more important than it ever has been.
Yeah, I would, that's spot on, and I would add to that the president, I think along with Carl Vinson, it could be known as the father of the two-ocean Navy. In fact, he famously left a note to his successor in office that said, "Do not split the battleship fleet in the Atlantic." Fascinating, right? Because he knew that concentration and mass was going to be important to win the fight, and so he said to President Taft, "Don't split the fleet." Now, you can't have that thinking unless you can take advantage of the inherent mobility of naval forces, and that's what the canal brings you. the ability to swing force back and forth. So I talked to you about the Imperial Navy, the German High Seas Fleet and the potential threat of the Japanese Imperial Navy at the time. He could see that coming, a visionary as always, the president. Now, if you're going to concentrate the fleet in one area, then you have to be able to move quickly to the other. Again, taking advantage of the inherent mobility of naval forces. You need the canal to do that. And we still need the canal to do that. And so I think the efforts to make sure that we have appropriate control of that when we need it, that we're not subject to control that won't allow us to use it, that's folly. And the president recognized that, and I suspect the administration recognizes that now. Clearly, that is also a modern parallel in the Strait of Hormuz right now.
Yeah.
And then just to give you a sense of the depth of the importance of the canal to the Navy, the width of the canal when it was built was based on the width we thought we would need for our Navy ships to go through. And today even, the design of our ships is based on how wide the canal is.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
But
So
a
the
carrier still cannot go through.
A carrier is far from being able to go through, I would
Yeah,
assume.
but
Yeah.
everything else is designed
Everything
to go
else
through.
except for a carrier can go through. That's interesting. Let's segue a little bit to leadership questions, because I think that Theodore Roosevelt's leadership characteristics were forged earlier in his life, but he brought all of those to bear when he spent his time building the modern Navy. He talked, in our prep conversations, we talked about the strenuous life, and I found it interesting that you guys had pretty strong opinions on the strenuous life in the current Navy. What does that concept mean now? The Navy's a little bit different than it was back then. There's a lot of different things. There's technology, there's drone capability, there's cyber capabilities that are necessary. So how is the strenuous life different than when it was when TR was president? And does it still require the same physical and mental toughness?
Sure, I'll jump on that, and then, so you have a ship driver, surface warfare officer, you have a submariner, and you have an aviator. And I think we all have a unique perspective when it comes to that.
That's a good way to look at it.
And,
He's the white scarf guy with
yeah,
you know,
yeah, the steely-eyed killer
hotel
of the deep.
rooms after the
He's a Top
flight.
Gun. He's Tom Cruise.
Hey, wear
Yeah,
your
he's got all
sunglasses,
of
man.
the
You should
cool
have your
things.
sunglasses on.
Yeah.
So,
I spent enough time around John McCain. I know
Yeah.
how much fun aviators have.
there you go. So I would tell you that during your question, you keyed on a lot of things that I think are important when we consider the changing character of warfare, right? Technology and all the things that we want to bring to bear to the joint force so that we can fight and win, and hopefully deter so that we don't have to fight and win. But the nature of warfare is immutable. That does not change. It's violent, it's brutish, and it requires the strenuous life. And so that brings us to the Navy then. And these are things that don't change. And so, you know, short of space, the most challenging environment that your joint force fights in is at sea. President Roosevelt would say that himself. John Paul Jones would have said that himself, and that is certainly the case today. So a strenuous life is one that still animates your Navy today.
How is it different?
It's not,
Okay, it's not
in that
different at all.
regard. So, you know, you were still, the first question a captain asks when he gets up, and I've commanded 3 ships, a squadron, a strike group, and 2 fleets. The first question
that's a
we
lot.
ask when we get up is what? What's the weather going to be today, tomorrow, and the next day, right? Because you're so challenged by operating within the weather. And it takes a certain hardiness to be able to fight in that environment and to take a hit and keep on fighting. So I'm going to talk to you about toughness now, okay? Toughness is one of the 4 key attributes that the Navy looks for in its sailors. There's others, integrity, accountability, and the rest. But toughness is my favorite. And the reason for that is toughness is what we want in our sailors, and we have a couple over here, to be able to take a fight and take a hit and keep on fighting. That's the strenuous life. And to do that at sea, where blood is running in the scuppers, that's pretty hard, right? Toughness is an equation where it's fitness times belonging times identity squared, right? Fitness, all the incarnations of fitness, physical, spiritual, mental, keep going, name it. Times the sense of belonging to something bigger, times your identity, the identity of the individual and identity of the team, right? And so if we're going to have tough sailors who can take a fight, take a hit and keep on fighting, and that's the same for soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Guardians, Coast Guardsmen across the board, then they must embrace the strenuous life, not just for the fitness piece, but for all of those aspects of it. And at sea, it's particularly challenging. That has not changed. One last quick sea story. My dad had command too. He came on board my ship as we were steaming up from Norfolk up to Newport, Rhode Island. And as I was making my landing on the pier up in Newport, besides criticizing my ship handling skills, thanks, Dad, afterward we were talking about it. I said, Dad, could you do this right now? And he goes, yeah. The technology has changed, but the feel of the ship, how it moves at sea, how it operates in weather, the smell, the relationships between the officer and the enlisted, the officer and the chief, the captain and his XO, that has not changed. That's immutable. I could do it right now.
Wow, that's really interesting. Do you guys, is that your experience too?
Well, I was going to make a distinction between the mental and the physical aspects of the
Please.
job. I would say the strenuous life between your ears is a lot more difficult now than it was back then. Everything is so much more complex, and the things that you have to deal with now. Today, I mean, you have to be a technologist, an engineer. In case of submariners, a nuclear engineer. You've got all the operational things, being a warfighter, and then you've got all the diplomatic activity that you have to do. It's a full spectrum, and it happens at such a rapid pace that it is far more strenuous than I think they ever experienced then. Physically, it is in a different way. I mean, nobody's shoveling coal anymore. But you have to go for hour after hour after hour in a way that requires a physical fitness that would have been very applicable back then as well. So I would say that it's every bit as physically strenuous, but in a different way, but mentally, clearly far more strenuous. And while I've got the mic, I have to say the first president whoever, and since I'm a submariner, the first president who ever got underway on a submarine was Theodore Roosevelt.
USS Plunger.
Wow.
He did it on the QT too, by the way. So he snuck away to...
How is it fueled?
Yeah,
Fueled?
Yeah,
Diesel powered.
diesel.
but he snuck away from his detail in Oyster Bay and went aboard, went down for an hour, drove the ship, came back up, didn't tell anybody until he was done. Now imagine that now.
Yeah, that would be.
The only thing I would add is that, as I sit here next to two of the greatest naval leaders in the modern naval era, I would certainly wholeheartedly agree with what they've said, and they know better than anyone. The only thing that I would add is, as I pondered my future profession, my grandfather was a World War II naval aviator. He was a tail gunner in the same community that I flew in Naval Aviation Maritime Patrol. He said nothing worth having is easy. Right, and the challenges that we face in the Navy and the challenges that President Roosevelt faced, as he approached it and considered the value of a global Navy, are relatively the same, seemingly insurmountable, but let's get after it. And the other thing I'd say is President Roosevelt was a leader by example. He was a Rough Rider. He was going to get after it himself. If somebody else couldn't do it, he was just going to do it himself. And so I think that's largely the same approach that we have today. We just have to meet those challenges and fight in all domains.
Yeah, I think just kind of riffing off of both of those things, it's important to recognize that if the president were here today, he would recognize this mental challenge that Stuart correctly points out. Because I think his life, his writings, his leadership style, leadership by example, would be one where he would look at that midshipman or that new officer and he would say, look, I don't want you to be a risk-averse corporate entity. I want you to embody push and intelligence. I want you to be lethal and hungry and lean and disruptive. kind of hard in the bureaucratic world we live in now. What's the bottom line, all that, and something that the president himself embodied in every way, physically as well, leading from the front? And that's courage. And that's courage. It takes
I'm glad
courage.
you kind of lead into my next question exactly. We're here in Medora, North Dakota, where TR came as sort of a New York dandy, and after a great tragedy in his life, and his life changed dramatically here. This is where he forged his own version of the strenuous life, both mentally and physically. So I'm going to get a little personal and ask each of you, taking this and looking back on your own careers, what challenge, either personal or professional, most shaped you as a leader? Because you all are leaders. I think that's a question that everybody asks today. You know, what makes a leader? What forges that? We know what it was for TR, but how about you? Do you mind sharing?
Okay, I'll start. I guess I think that always in my career, from the beginning until to the present day, you know, our biggest asset, our biggest resource in the Navy, and in my mind, if you're a genuine leader, the thing that you're most concerned about is taking care of your sailors. And you know, we've all had points in our career where we've lost sailors. It happens. It's a reality of life. The work that we do is dangerous, and whether it's a mishap underway or whether it's a suicide when you're in between deployments, either way, you know, as a genuine concerned leader, the hardest thing is when your team takes a hit like that. And that is also the time, I will say on a positive note though, when the team has to rally together and has to rise to the next set of challenges and move on. Right, so we pay respects to when we face adversity like that, but we resolve ourselves to continue on, and leaders, you know, lead through that adversity and energize the team to continue on the mission.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm going to comment also on the formative moments in my early career, and they also revolve around the enlisted sailor. For you who maybe aren't familiar with the United States Navy, you should know that our great strength are the Blue Jackets, the sailors, who do everything. It's the job as a surface warfare officer, as an example, it's the job of the officer to fight the ship and then enable the sailors to maintain it so that we can do that. And we try to stay out of their way when we do it. We give them the tools that they need. And you should know, too, looking at my sailor who's taking a picture over here, they are incredibly independent. And they are willing to speak truth to power. I think probably more than the other services, because we come up from an environment in which it's, hey, go over the horizon, come back in 2 years, Commodore Perry with Japan open for trade. That's our legacy. And so our sailors reflect that.
Well, that's interesting. So you feel that sailors maybe have a little bit more.
Well, they're certainly going to speak truth to power.
Okay.
I personally have lived that, right? And that doesn't mean that you don't have good order and discipline, but they feel, and if you're a good leader, you create that environment where they can come forward and say, hey, Ensign Grady, there's a better way to do this. You might want to think about that. And I learned that from my first Chief Petty Officer. So unique to the Navy is this idea, this incarnation of a Chief Petty Officer, someone who's very experienced in their rating, whether it's as a bosun mate or a gunner's mate, and someone who has risen to the level that they are a subject matter expert, right, and a great leader. So much so that we give them a different uniform. They go from the Cracker Jacks like you're seeing over there, which are the coolest freaking uniform in the world, and we actually put them in khaki just like officers, a little bit different. And it's a huge transitional period. And so the young officer then who does not learn from their senior enlisted is the one who fails. And this is what my Chief Petty Officer, Senior Chief John Bureau, who's passed away, this is what he taught me. And this is the hardest lesson I think young leaders have to wrestle with. And that is, there's a difference between being a friend and being friendly. Young leaders who try to be a friend to the sailors fail. I'm looking at you, you know this. Young leaders who know the difference, being friendly, but have to make that tough call when the bullets are flying because they know their sailors and what they're capable of and listen to them, those are the ones who succeed, and my chief taught me that.
That's great.
Yeah, I think it's two things that go together. I mean, all these things are very true and applicable. There are different aspects to them. Just want to highlight a different thing. I think one of them is always going the extra mile in everything that you do. But twinned with that is venturing into things that you aren't really familiar with and learning new things. And I think those are both characteristics of Theodore Roosevelt. So like at the Naval Academy, when you're told to do 100 push-ups, you immediately do 110 to beat Army, 120 to beat Air Force, very academy-oriented. But you get told to go climb this wall with a rope hanging from it. You don't know how to go about it. You go figure it out, and you fall several times till you learn how to do it. And it's those early things you learn to build that habit of always going the extra mile and venturing into things you haven't mastered yet, but you're willing to do it, are really key to a naval career.
You all three focused on seamen and your crews and the importance, and that's really something that is going to resonate with me for a while. But with this institution here, we look to bring families and young people together. I see some young people out there that I know very well, and I know that I'm wondering, what do you think the Navy needs from American families, American schools, American culture right now to prepare these seamen that you have such great esteem for? I mean, are we doing a good job at it now? What could we do better?
I think America's always done a pretty good job with this.
Yeah.
It has to do with the culture of the nation. But for parents specifically, what I would encourage is letting kids lead in things, no matter what the activity might be, to learn from doing and build those habits of leading and bearing responsibility. That's what makes the biggest difference.
One concern, I guess, with our modern culture, it seems in our history, we've had times when within families everybody knew somebody who served, and so there was a connection within the family structure. I think at the moment that may be lacking a bit, but I think it's a problem we can easily overcome with modern technology and with the ability to connect virtually, and for small town America, if they don't have a connection to the U.S. Navy, I think our challenge is through recruiting efforts and education campaigns and information campaigns to offer the opportunity, to talk about the experiences and the realities and challenges with the Navy. Just a very quick example of that, when I had command of the Naval Air Station in Fort Worth, Texas, one of our employees on the base, working for $22 an hour in the recreation department, we were chatting, and an F-18 flew overhead, and he locked onto it. I said, "Have you ever thought about doing that?" And he looked at me like, I know nothing about that. I don't know how to answer that question or make that connection. Long story short, we put him in the F-18 simulator. He went to the recruiter. He just finished the deployment with the USS Ford as a backseater in a Growler in an F-18 aircraft. So those opportunities, that's just one example, but that's the challenge.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that soft tissue connection is made and we can answer questions.
Yeah, so much here. So much here. First, to the parents here, I'm supremely impressed by the product that we get into the service. So give yourselves a round of applause. The sailors, and I'll speak with this as the vice chairman, the soldiers and the airmen and the guardians and the Marines and the Coast Guardsmen that come into the force are absolutely incredible. They are eye-watering. I'll give you an aviation example since I was a strike group commander. If you go on board, if you watch Top Gun, right? Who's watched Top Gun? Please all raise your hand. Okay, and we could have the 5-beer conversation. Is it Maverick or the original that's better? I don't know. But if you watch that movie, right, and you look at an airplane that's on the flight deck, under the canopy of the airplane, there'll be a pilot's name. I'm in your lane here, but you know where I'm going on this. Now, the pilot's name is on there. His name or her name is on one of the airplanes. They fly them all, though. They fly all the airplanes in the squadron, just whichever one's ready to go at the time. However, if you look at the front end of the airplane, right above the front wheel, you'll see a name, and it's a sailor's name. Probably 21-year-old sailor, and he or she owns that airplane. That $250 million jet is hers from cradle to grave on the flight deck. right? And there's a different name on every airplane.
Interesting.
Okay? This is the product that you are putting out when they come into the fleet, into the field, and into the flight line. So keep doing it. That's the good news. That's the glow. The grow is, I'm somewhat concerned that it's literally just 1% who serve, right? And this gets to what John pointed out, that we might be increasingly disconnected from the population that we serve. We see it in Congress, for sure. Right? Now the number's coming back up because of the post-Desert Storm era, but there was a point there that Nader, when it was about 5% had served. We're asking them a lot to make decisions on things that they have never seen. And if you go back to the 1% who serve, what concerns me then is you start to build a warrior caste, right? A warrior class. If you have 100 second lieutenants and ensigns stand in front of you, and you say, raise your hand if you come from a military family. My own son, as an example, me, you. Yep. 80 hands go up. 80% of the hands come from a military family. Now there's power in that. They understand the culture. They understand what they're getting into. They've committed to the ethos, all the things that are important. But yet we start looking different than the society we serve. So my quest to the parents and folks in the audience is continue to stress that military service or civil service in any way, public service, is important. Let's get past the 1%. And I will leave you with this. In our recruiting, there is one pernicious narrative there that we have to push back. So by a show of hands, who's employed a military veteran or a military person? Raise your hands, please. Okay, good portion of you. Thank you for that. The pernicious narrative out there is don't join the military because you'll waste 5 years of your life. Now, I'm sorry, I won't get too salty. That's total BS. The people who just raised their hand know what they're getting, and we have to fight against that. So please, spread the good news about what will happen when you join.
You're absolutely right, and opening the aperture a little bit beyond the Navy, you all three have chosen a life of public service. When you're younger, I'm sure each of you had other opportunities. You could have gone and made money in a venture, you could have started your own business, but you all, for some reason, chose a life of public service. Can you tell us, the audience, a little bit about what that's meant to your life, in how that decision that you made when you were young men changed your life?
Yeah, so I'm a son of two educators. My mother was a teacher, my father was a principal and superintendent. So public service was just kind of how I grew up in things. I would say here in North Dakota, it's just in the culture. People help out each other all the time in a way that I've not found in the same way as here, and that's in part why I've come back home. But also, for me, I was given some special opportunities along the way with the Naval Academy and Oxford and a White House Fellowship and other things that were investments in me for me to pay back. And so I've always felt an obligation to do this as long as I could in order to provide that return on investment for those who believed in me at an earlier age.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I am that warrior caste. My son, who served as a ship driver like me, was 5th generation. So there's Nick, there's me, my dad's granddad was a Marine for 23 years, and his dad served in the Spanish-American War. Very apropos to here. So Nick himself was 5th generation. I remember the day that I kind of got the bug, and my dad took me underway. They would do these things called Tiger Cruises, where you could get underway with your parents, and we spent overnight, and we shot guns, and we ate ice cream, and we watched movies, and we went down into engineering, and you kind of get hooked on that. But for me, I think when the decision came, it was the mission, right? It was trying to do something greater than myself. Look, folks, we don't do this to make a ton of money, right? Even 4-star Admirals don't make that much money. But we do it because the mission is there. We do it because we think we are the ones that can help protect this nation. People ask me all the time, why do you want your son to do it? Because I know who he is as a man, and if I wanted anybody else to do it, I want him first. because the nation is that important. And so I think it's this sense of mission and giving back. Now, we talked about it briefly. It doesn't have to be in military service. You come from a family of public service. There's a special place in heaven for school teachers, frankly. It can be anything. And the president himself, TR, would say, it's the great democratizer, right? Public service, and I'm pretty sure he would, I'm gonna mangle his words, but in his case, he says that public service is what defragments, right? That the state is a shared responsibility, and that the more people who do it, the more we come together. That itself is a reason to push public service.
Great. Admiral Townsend.
Yeah, I think in my case, I mentioned my grandfather was in the Navy. My father was drafted into the Army in the Vietnam time frame. And they raised me in a very small town in upstate New York. And I think they raised me with a sense of appreciation for not taking things for granted. My father, both my parents taught me a great many things, practical, real things in the world. And I can't say that they planted the idea of naval service in my head, but I can say without a doubt that they encouraged the value of it. And quite honestly, for me, it was a bit of a selfish choice. I wanted to pay for school and I wanted to fly. And the Navy offered me that opportunity. I got that bug when I was young, and I'm blessed to have gotten it because, I'm still doing it today. But it was an opportunity. And along the way, I learned the value of service, and I learned the value of paying back to those, both my parents, teachers, coaches, all of the mentors that encouraged me and continue to encourage me. And it's a team sport, right? So, that's kind of been my journey along the way.
Wait, by the way, just real quick, what's the largest air force in the world? United States Air Force. By some measures, what's the second largest air force in the world? Naval aviation.
I know that there's always a little tension there too. Yeah. Well, we have time for one last question, and thank you again for sharing those insights on public service, which is really such an important part of what makes America great, is that we are a nation of public servants. So we're sitting here the first day at a presidential library. It's pretty auspicious. And we open with a long view into the future. If we're sitting here in 2076, I'm going away from public service and putting your Navy hats back on. What do you want to be true about the United States Navy in 2076? And what decisions facing the country today and in the future will determine what happens? Why don't we start with you, Admiral?
Well, I hope that our past and everything that we've learned from President Roosevelt's time frame through the present day and, to your point, into the future, I hope that what we embody today, the honor, courage, and commitment with which I've served, and my strong belief is the Navy will continue to hold those fundamentals true, and I think it will continue to serve us indefinitely into the future.
Yeah, I hope that the leaders running the Navy from here to 50 years from now continue to make all the right decisions so that the Navy's keeping the peace around the world. And it's that peace that then drives prosperity for all of us.
I hope that when my grandson, who at that point would be retired after a 42-year naval career, will look back on his time and say... Or granddaughter, which she's a month old right now, would say, we built a Navy of honor, courage, and commitment that deterred the fight. And that the big fight never came because we were strong and we were where we needed to be and we were ready. And I think that's what the president would say.
That goes exactly to the quote that I opened with.
It does. It brings us full circle, right?
Yes.
And that, if you're going to carry a big stick, then it better not be rusty, and it better be ready.
Exactly right.
And I hope my grandson can say, we were ready and we didn't have to use it.
Well, thank you all three so much, and thank you mostly for your service to our country. It is a great honor to have you all here, and thank you for taking the time to join us on this very special day in Medora.